So, you want to talk about the gays, or more specifically, you want to talk about why a certain subset of extremely vocal, extremely agitated Christians are obsessed with them, obsessed with who they love, who they sleep with, and who they're allowed to marry. And of course, they're obsessed with telling you that their obsession isn't really their obsession, it's God's. You see, they're just the messengers. They don't want to be bothered by this. They'd love to just, go about their day, loving their neighbor and turning the other cheek. But alas, the Bible says so. It's right there in the book. Their hands are tied. They have to oppose equal rights. They have to make sure that you know that a specific kind of love is, in fact, an abomination. I mean, it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. Am I right? And this is where the debate always begins. And more importantly, it's usually where it ends for most people. It becomes a tennis match of pedantry. It's what I like to call the legalism trap. You've seen it. You've probably been in it at some point. Someone pulls out the big guns, the clobber passages. They hit you with Leviticus. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. Boom. Game over, right? Then someone on the progressive side, the well-meaning side, pops up and says, but wait, that's from the holiness code. That also bans eating shellfish and wearing mixed fabrics. You can't just pick and choose. And then the conservative side says, but that's the ceremonial law or civil law. This is moral law. It's different. And then the progressive side says, yeah? How do you know? Who made you the arbiter of what's moral and what's ceremonial? Besides, the context was about pagan rituals. And then someone else jumps in and says, and what about Romans 1? Paul clearly says, and they quote it, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in their own persons the due penalty for their error. And then the other side says, but that wasn't about loving consensual relationships. That was about pederasty and temple prostitution and people who were naturally straight acting against their nature. It wasn't about people who are naturally gay. And then we get into the really fun stuff. We get into 1 Corinthians and 1 Timothy. We get out the Greek dictionaries. We start talking about arsenokoitai. Arsenokoitai, my favorite. This one word, this one obscure Greek compound word that Paul may or may not have even invented, is apparently the linchpin of all modern sexual ethics. One side says it clearly means homosexuals or sodomites. The other side says, nuh-uh. It clearly means male prostitutes or pederasts or economic exploiters. They argue about when the word homosexuality was even added to English translations of the Bible. Spoiler, it was shockingly recent, 1946. Before that, the translations were fuzzier. But that's beside the point. The debate rages back and forth. Both sides are digging through concordances, historical records, and translation notes. They're arguing about ancient Hebrew purity laws, about Roman-era sexual practices, about the true meaning of a word that appears exactly twice in the entire New Testament. And here's the kicker. Here's the little secret that nobody likes to say out loud in this particular sandbox. Both of these sides have valid points. Yeah, the progressive side is correct that we translate these words with our own cultural baggage. They're correct that the ancient world had no concept of homosexuality as a fixed personal orientation in the same way that we do today. They're correct that the context of many of these passages is about idolatry exploitation and impurity rituals, not a 20-year loving monogamous same-sex marriage. They're absolutely correct about that. But then the conservative side is also kind of pretty much correct as well. It's really hard to read the totality of the biblical witness, which is a tiny, tiny handful of verses, and come to the conclusion that the authors, these Bronze Age and Iron Age men, were, super cool with the idea of two dudes getting married. Let's be honest. The idea that Paul or the author of Leviticus was just trying to ban exploitative gay sex while giving a thumbs up to nice gay sex is, well, it's a stretch, to say the least. It's a very modern, very convenient, and quite frankly, very anachronistic reading. So, who's really right? Who wins this Bible debate? Who cares? That's right. Who gives a shit? The entire debate, this meticulous, obsessive, verse by verse, legalistic argument, it's the trap. Arguing these points, while it feels productive, while it feels like you're defeating them with their own logic, it tends to miss the entire catastrophic, blazing neon sign of the point. And worse than missing the point, it does something far more dangerous. And that is what we're going to talk about today. We're not just going to debunk the Christian reasons for banning homosexuality. We're going to debunk the entire game that they are making you play. Because arguing with a fundamentalist about the true meaning of arsenal coitae is like arguing with a flat earther about the specific species of space turtle that the disk of the world is riding on. You've already lost. You've already implicitly agreed that the turtle exists. You've agreed that their ancient mythological text is the valid framework, the valid battleground on which we must have this discussion. And that, my friends, is a sucker's bet. So today, we're taking a stand. We're going to acknowledge that what happens between consenting adults is the business of, wait for it, those consenting adults and nobody else's. And I'm going to show you step by step why every single religious argument against it is not just wrong, it's not just immoral, but it's profoundly stupid and transparently hypocritical. And I'm going to show you why even the progressive Christian argument is, in its own way, dangerously misguided, because it's still chained to the same toxic premise. This is your boy, Adam of NOLA. This is my channel, Skepticus, and we are going to destroy the foundation of this entire rotten bullshit argument once and for all. Why Bible bashing fails. Okay, so if we're not going to play their game, if we're not going to get out the Greek lexicons, what's the new game? What's the real framework? It's actually, well, it's really simple. It's so simple that you already know it. You live by it every single day, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or an atheist or a devout Pastafarian. You're still almost certainly living by it every single day. How do we, as a society, decide what should and should not be allowed? How do we decide what makes a good rule or a good law? Well, I'd argue, and I think most modern secular democratic societies would agree with me, that morality, and especially law, should be based on a pretty simple set of principles. 1, does this action or this law maximize prosperity, happiness, and freedom for the greatest number of people? And 2, does this action or this law cause no or at least minimal harm to everyone that's involved? It's basically a combination of live and let live, and don't be an asshole. Harm, freedom, well-being, consent. It's really that simple. These are the metrics. That's it. The whole list. What's not on that list? What words did I not say? I did not say holiness, purity, tradition, obedience to a divine command, what God thinks is icky. This is where people get really confused. They say, wait a minute, Adam, are you saying that law has nothing to do with morality? That's crazy. We have laws against theft, and it's immoral to steal. We have laws against murder, and of course, it's immoral to murder someone. And you're right, but you're right for the wrong reasons. You're confusing correlation with causation. We don't pass laws against theft because it's immoral in a vague cosmic God said so sense. We pass laws against theft because theft causes harm. It violates a person's property, their safety, their security, their well-being. It undermines the trust that a society needs to function. The harm is the actual reason for the law. The fact that most moral codes also happen to agree that theft is bad is, quite frankly, just a nice little bonus. It's an overlap. Think about it this way. There are plenty of things we pass laws about that have absolutely zero moral component. Here's a great example: jaywalking. In most cities, it is illegal to cross the street in the middle of a block. You can get a ticket, you can be fined. But are you an immoral person if you jaywalk on a completely empty street at 3 a.m.? Are you committing a sin? Have you stained your eternal soul? No, of course not. It's a stupid, artless rule that's designed for public order and just to keep the traffic moving. It's a regulatory issue, not a moral one. Now, let's flip it. There are countless things that are profoundly, deeply immoral, yet they still have no place in our legal system, and nor should they ever. For example, let's look at lying to your spouse. Let's say that you tell your husband or your wife that you love them when in fact you really don't. Let's say that you tell them that you were late from work because of traffic when in fact you were somewhere else. Is that a shitty thing to do? Yeah. Is it immoral? Absolutely. It's a betrayal of trust. It's deceptive. It's even potentially cruel. But should it be illegal? Are you kidding me? Of course not. Can you imagine that? Officer, arrest my husband. He lied to me about liking my new haircut. We would laugh that out of the courtroom or any other room where we brought it up. It would be tyranny. We, as a society, have collectively agreed that while lying to your spouse is absolutely immoral, it is not the government's job to legislate the private, personal, emotional interactions between consenting adults. Unless, and this is the big unless, it crosses the line into actual definable harm. Like, for example, fraud. If you lie to your spouse to get them to sign a document that gives you all of their money, that's not just immoral lying, that's fraud. It's theft. It has crossed the line from a moral failing into a harm failing, and it's now a legal matter. If you lie to your spouse about, well, not giving them an STI that you picked up somewhere, well, that's endangerment. It's harm. And if they press it, it could absolutely be a legal matter. But lying about your feelings, lying about where you were last night, that ain't cool, but it's a moral problem. It's a relationship problem that you and your spouse have to solve one way or another. It is not, nor should it ever be, a legal problem. So we have some pretty clear, pretty functional categories for things that can go wrong. One is things that are illegal and immoral, like murder or theft. Why? Well, because they cause harm. The second is things that are illegal, but they're not immoral, like jaywalking, zoning laws. Why? Well, those laws are there for public order. And then we have things that are immoral, but they're not illegal, like lying to your partner, being generally a selfish jerk. Why are those not laws? Because they're private matters that don't cross the line into tangible public harm or a violation of someone's rights. This is a good, functional system. It protects us from each other, but it also protects us from, well, from you. It protects us from having your personal, private, religious, moral code legislated and forced upon everyone else. So now let's take this functioning, rational, harm-based system and let's apply it to homosexuality. Two men in a loving, committed relationship. They build a life together. They pay their taxes. They rescue a dog. They get married. Where is the harm? Who's the victim? Who's being stolen from? Who's being assaulted? Who's being defrauded? I can wait. But I don't think you have a good answer, because the answer is nobody. There is no victim. There is no harm. There is no violation of anyone's rights. It is, by every rational, legal, and moral standard, in the exact same category as lying to your spouse. It's a private, personal, consensual matter between adults. Actually, it's better than that, because lying to your spouse is at least deceptive, but two men loving each other, that's just two men loving each other. There's no deception. There's no inherent immorality at all, unless you've been pre-programmed to believe that there is. So when a Christian says homosexuality should be banned or same-sex marriage should be illegal, they are not making a legal argument based on harm. They are making a theological argument based on their own internal ideals of purity. They are trying to take a rule from their club, a rule that they think is in their rule book, and they're trying to make it a law for everyone. It's like them trying to make it illegal to be a jerk to your spouse. They are trying to make sin and crime, which are not the same thing, the same thing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, and Joe, it's called a theocracy. And it is the exact opposite of the freedom that these same people will, in the very next breath, scream that they're terrified of losing. The entire argument is bankrupt before we even open the Bible. We don't need to argue about Leviticus. The argument's over. It fails the very first test of why do we even have laws. But it gets so much worse. Because the sin that they're so obsessed with, the abomination, they're not even remotely consistent about that. So this is my favorite part, the sheer, unadulterated, weapons-grade hypocrisy of it all. Let's look at the company that homosexuality keeps. Let's look at the other things that throughout the entire history of the church have been considered grievous, soul-ending, abominable sexual sins. They've made quite a list. Let's see. What have we got here? Well, one is just sex before marriage. Even if it's with the person that you are going to marry, even if it's the only person you ever marry, even if it's the only person that you ever get naked with, even if you love them and love them truly till the day you die, nope, doesn't matter. You had sex before marriage, that is sin. Some people would even think that it's damnation. Now, I know that in most Christian denominations, they pretty much don't care or look the other way as long as you end up marrying that person and staying with them forever and ever. Amen. But if you ask any pastor whether it's moral for them to be bunking before the ceremony, they will almost all tell you no. It's just that nobody wants to actually live with that rule anymore because nearly no one wants to actually stay celibate until after the night of their marriage. Then there's sex outside your marriage. Adultery. Okay, this one does cause harm. It breaks a vow. It's a breach of contract. It's deceptive. So it lands in the immoral category, no doubt, just like lying. But is it illegal? Not in most places, but in the Bible, the penalty wasn't counseling, it was death, stoning people to death. Also, I feel compelled to point out that while we normally think of sex outside your marriage as being adultery, there are a minority of people in the world who practice other relationship models like polyamory, in which case, when done properly and honestly, sex outside your marriage doesn't have to cause anyone harm whatsoever. Not that most Christians want to talk about that at all. Then there's masturbation. Oh yes, the sin of onan, wasting your seed. For centuries, this was taught as a grievous mortal sin. C.S. Lewis, the great Christian apologist, called it the central vice. It was seen as a horrific act of self-pollution. Then there's contraception. For most of Christian history, all contraception was seen as a form of abortion, or at best, a rejection of God's command to be fruitful and multiply. It was onan all over again. The Catholics still formally ban it. Evangelicals just decided to get quiet about it sometime around the 1960s when they realized that they liked having smaller families and more money. Then there's sex during a woman's menses. Oh yeah, that's in Leviticus 2. In Leviticus 18, verse 19, it says, "You shall not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness while she is in her menstrual uncleanness." It's an, say it with me, abomination. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. According to this Bible, this book that you want to draw your morals from and base your laws upon, they put sex with your woman who is on her cycle in the same category as homosexuality, which, by the way, if you keep reading, they also put it in the same category as bestiality. Yes, that's right. They're abominations. Really have to trust that categorization. How about oral or anal sex? And I don't mean just between men. I mean between a husband and wife. For centuries, theologians like Thomas Aquinas argued that any sexual act that was not penis in vagina and open to procreation was a mortal sin. That means oral, anal, mutual masturbation, all of it. Grave sin. Why? Because it was unnatural. It wasn't for babies. What about kink or role playing? Anything weird, anything that wasn't the vanilla, lights off for England procreative missionary position. Now, I know I've mentioned this in other videos, and I know that some Christians would probably say, well, it doesn't say anything about that in the Bible, so there's no ban on it at all. Let's get real. If I like to get tied up and spanked by my wife, do you think that the reason that's not in the Bible is because the old Hebrew men from 3,000 years ago had no problem with it? Or do you think it's because those ancient dudes had no concept that some people might like this type of kinky play? And if they did have a concept of it, do you really think that they would have remained silent on it, given all of the crap that they legislate in books like Leviticus? So these things that I've been listing, this is the actual historical theological list of sexual sins that have been prosecuted by different denominations and different congregations in varying degrees ever since the institution of Judaism and following after it Christianity came into play. How would you like to be one of my advisors? I'm using Skepticus's memberships as a way to allow you to have a voice in the content and the direction of this channel. I hope to see you in the membership pool, and I want to hear your voice in what Skepticus is doing going forward. Now, what is the one word, the one concept, the one ethical principle that is never discussed, never brought up, never even considered in any of these ancient texts or theological debates. You know what it is. I've already said it. Consent. Think about it. The Bible is obsessed with all of the wrong things. It's obsessed with purity. Don't touch this unclean thing. It's obsessed with procreation. Don't waste your seed. It's obsessed with hierarchy. Wives, submit to your husbands. It's obsessed with property. And women, unfortunately, for nearly all of the Bible, Old Testament and New, were absolutely in the category of property. The one thing that we consider the absolute cornerstone of all modern sexual ethics, the only thing that truly matters, is consent. And on consent, the Bible is absolutely silent. Worse than silent. It condones and regulates non-consensual sex. It regulates how to sell your daughter into sexual slavery. It tells a woman who has been raped in a field that she must marry her rapist as long as he pays her father the bride price. That's from Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 through 29. It treats captured women in warfare as the spoils of that war to be taken as wives. That can be seen in Deuteronomy 21, verses 10 through 14. This is the book that people are thumping as the ultimate guide to sexual morality. A book that is more concerned with a man wasting his seed by himself than it is with a man raping his neighbor's wife, where the primary crime wasn't the rape, but the property violation against the husband. Are you kidding me? The entire biblical framework for sexual ethics is abhorrent. It's not just outdated, it is morally repugnant. It has no concept of female agency. It has no concept of mutual pleasure as a valid good. It has no concept of love as the foundation for a sexual relationship. And it has absolutely no concept of consent as the non-negotiable prerequisite for any sexual act. So when a Christian, conservative or progressive, comes to me and wants to start a debate about what the Bible really means about homosexuality, I have to stop them. You want to use this book, this one, the one that's fine with slavery and fine with rape marriage, but draws the line at two men holding hands. The one that's more worried about two different kinds of thread in your t-shirt than it is about a woman's right to say no. You want to use that book as our moral framework. No, I refuse. I reject the entire premise. I reject the entire framework. I reject the book. And this is where we get to the real danger. The thing that I mentioned at the very beginning, the trap that even the good guys fall into. Why progressive readings fail. Okay, so first of all, let's get some stuff out in the open here. I spend a lot of time on this channel doing internal critiques of Christianity, especially doing internal critiques of the Bible. And I'm not going to lie, I love it. It's fun to point out the contradictions, the absurdities, the historical impossibilities. It's gotcha on a grand theological scale. I mean, my flagship series, God-Free Bible Study, is me reading the Bible and then giving all of my pointed commentary on everything that we've just read. And within context, in certain frameworks, there is nothing wrong with that. But there is a danger, a huge one. When you spend all of your time attacking an institution from within, when you spend all your time trying to beat them at their own game, using their own rules, eventually you risk validating the institution. You risk validating the rules, you risk validating the game itself. Think about it. When a progressive Christian scholar spends years of their life writing a 500-page book to prove that the word arsenokoitai doesn't really mean homosexuals, what are they implicitly saying? They're implicitly saying the Bible is the ultimate source of authority on this matter. And if the Bible did clearly ban homosexuality, then it would be wrong. But good news, everyone. My research shows that it doesn't. Dodged a bullet there. But they're still giving all the power to the text. They're conceding the battleground to the fundamentalists. They're saying, yes, you're correct. This ancient, deeply flawed, morally bankrupt collection of texts is the one and only place that we should be looking for answers on 21st century human sexuality. But you're just reading it wrong. This is a losing strategy. Why? Well, because first of all, as I said before, you're probably wrong. The authors of the Bible probably were just as homophobic as they were sexist and pro-slavery and pro-genocide. It's not even a high bar. But second, and far more importantly, you've lost before you've even started. You've given them the moral high ground. You've given them the authority of the Word of God. And now you're just haggling over the translation. The real argument, the only valid argument that matters isn't what did Paul mean? The only argument that matters is why in the name of all that is holy or even just sane are we asking Paul? Why are we letting a first century apocalyptic misogynistic tent maker who fully believed that the world was going to end in his lifetime set the terms for anything? Why are we letting Leviticus, which is a purity code for a specific tribe of desert nomads 3,000 years ago, have any bearing on civil rights in a 21st century secular democracy? It's insane. It is profoundly inhumane, and it's regressive. And at some point, we, as a society, especially those of us on the outside, have to stop playing that game. We have to stop getting excited when a new scholar disproves Romans 1. We have to stop handing the bigot the very weapon that they're using to hit us with and just saying, you're holding it wrong. We have to have the courage to say, put the damn book down. Your book does not matter. Your book does not get to make laws for me. Your book does not get to define my morality or my neighbor's marriage. And even if there were 50 new books of the Bible discovered tomorrow, and if all 50 of them did nothing but specifically, graphically, and repeatedly ban same-sex relationships in every conceivable detail, it wouldn't matter, because it would still be wrong. It would still be immoral, and it would still be inhumane, because a bad law doesn't become a good law just because a God said it. A cruel act doesn't become a kind act just because it's in a holy book. Bigotry doesn't become righteousness just because it's ancient. Our moral cues must come from here, from now, from us, from our capacity for empathy. Yeah, Charlie Kirk, empathy, for our understanding of harm, from our commitment to consent and freedom. If your holy book is at odds with those things, then your holy book is wrong. And if your holy book is at odds with those things, then your holy book sucks. Full stop. And the funniest part of it all, the absolute gut-busting, knee-slapping irony of this entire debate, Christians already know this. They inherently understand this. Don't believe me? Well, they live this reality every single day of their lives. And that, my friend, is the final nail in this very, very stupid coffin. Why they are all hypocrites. Christians love to ignore their Bible. It is quite possibly their favorite pastime, right after potlucks and judging people. They are masters of cherry picking. They've turned it into an Olympic sport. They happily, joyfully toss aside every ancient law that they no longer want to follow, and they reject every ancient law from other religions, right? I mean, no Southern Baptist is ever worried that they're violating the sexual ethics of the Quran. No Presbyterian is losing sleep over what the Vedas have to say about anything. Why? Because they say, well, that's a false religion. That's a false book. It has no authority over me. Exactly. That right there, that feeling, that instinctive dismissal of an ancient text that you do not believe has authority, that is exactly how I and every other skeptic and every other person with empathy feels about your book. You get it. You understand the principle. You just have a blind spot for one specific book. But it's worse than that. They don't just ignore other people's books. They ignore their own. Let's go back to the source. Let's go back to Leviticus, the same book, the same section of the same book that calls lying with a man as with a woman an abomination. What else is in there? Well, Leviticus 19:19, nor shall you wear a garment made of two different kinds of material, a polycotton blend, an abomination. Every single one of you wearing a t-shirt that isn't 100% pure cotton or 100% pure polyester, you are an abomination. You are in violation of the holiness code. Leviticus 11:7-8, the pig is unclean for you. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. Bacony abomination. Enjoy your bacon. Enjoy your ham sandwiches. Enjoy your pork rinds. You are defiling yourselves according to the very same book that you're using to defile the lives of gay people. In Deuteronomy 22, verse 5, it says, a woman shall not wear a man's apparel, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment. For whoever does such things is an abomination to the Lord your God. Every woman in this entire country who has ever worn a pair of pants, a pantsuit, jeans, slacks, they are all an abomination. Hell, let's get New Testament, shall we? Let's go to Paul, the same guy who wrote Romans 1 and Arsenal Coite. Let's look at 1 Timothy chapter 2, right after the part about Arsenal Coite in chapter 1. Verse 9 says, women should dress themselves modestly and decently, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothes. Verse 12 says, I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She is to be kept silent. I'm sorry. I can't hear you, Susan. I can't hear you, Mary. I can't hear you, female Sunday school teacher. I can't hear you, female voter. Paul, your guy, said to keep your mouth shut. So what happens? What happens when you point this out? You know what happens. The great theological tap dance begins. Oh, well, that was cultural. That was for that specific church in Ephesus. That was ceremonial law, not moral law. Oh, that bit about bacon? Well, that's ceremonial. The bit about shellfish, that's ceremonial. The bit about mixed fabrics, ceremonial. The bit about women wearing pants, well, that's cultural. The bit about women not speaking in church, that's super cultural, definitely cultural. But the part about gays, that one. No, that one is moral. That one is timeless. That one is eternal. That's an abomination forever. How do you know? Who died and made you the editor of God's in and out list? What magical, invisible red pen are you using to go through the inerrant, infallible Word of God and decide which parts are really God and which parts are, just cultural suggestions? The answer is there is no pen. There's no magic decoder ring. There's only their own pre-existing 21st century prejudice. That's it. That's the entire system. They don't get their homophobia from the Bible. They bring their homophobia to the Bible. They bring their transphobia to the Bible. They bring their sexism to the Bible. And then they rummage through this vast, ancient, contradictory, and deeply weird library of text until they find a handful of broken, out-of-context verses that they can use as a divine justification for the bigotry that they already felt. It's not identity politics from the other side that they're fighting. It's their own. Their identity as biblical Christians is propped up by their opposition to this one thing. They've already given up on slavery. They've mostly given up on visible public sexism. They've definitely given up on the dietary laws. They've definitely given up on the clothing laws. The only hill that they have left to die on, the only thing that makes them feel separate and holy and countercultural and other anymore is hating gay people. It's the last socially acceptable in their circles prejudice left over from the Bronze Age that they can still cling to and call it righteousness. It's pathetic. So let's recap. Number one, the endless, nitpicky debate about what the Bible really says about homosexuality is a trap. It's a waste of time, and it implicitly validates the authority of the very book that's being used as a weapon against you. Two, the only rational basis for law in a free society is the harm principle. Does an action cause tangible harm to another person? If the answer is no, the government has no business being involved. Full stop. Two men getting married causes zero harm. Three, the only rational basis for sexual morality is consent. Any ethical framework that prioritizes purity, tradition, or procreation over mutual enthusiastic consent is a morally bankrupt framework. The Bible's framework is morally bankrupt. Four, arguing with bigots on their own terms is a fool's errand. We must change the battlefield, especially on this issue, from what does the Bible say to why are we listening to the damn Bible in the first place? We must reject the premise, not just quibble with the details. And five, the entire Christian argument is an exercise in the most stunning, transparent, and shameless hypocrisy. They all ignore the parts of their own book that are inconvenient for them. They only cling to the ancient, inhumane laws that bolster their own sense of identity and justify their own modern prejudices. The entire Christian case against homosexuality is a house of cards built on a foundation of sand in the middle of a hurricane. It is nothing. So, what happens between two consenting adults, or three, or however many? What they do in their bedroom, in their home, or at the courthouse when they sign a marriage license is their own damn business. It's not your business. It's not my business. It damn sure is not the business of the government. And it is categorically not the business of a council of ancient, goat-herding, patriarchal, Bronze Age nomads and their first century apocalyptic, misogynistic apostles. The conversation is over. It's time to move on. I'm also going to throw out one disclaimer here at the end of this diatribe. I always wonder if I should say these things because it should be completely ancillary to the point. But I do want to point out that whoever cares I'm a straight man. Not that it's any of your business, but I bring this up because I always know that if I speak on issues such as homosexuality, there's going to be some people thinking, oh, that's it. See, he's an atheist because he's gay. And that's why he left the church. And that's the only reason he's an atheist, because he wants to sin. And of course, it shouldn't matter whether I'm gay or not. What I'm speaking is truth. But I also want to make it clear that I'm not speaking this as some way for me to justify my own sexual appetites. Although, again, if I were, it would still be logical and righteous because what I'm speaking is truth. One of the biggest problems with this issue is that Christian men across this country couldn't be bothered to lift a pinky because they're straight. So it doesn't affect them. As long as it's hurting someone else, they can be happy that they're in the in group. And that prospect is disgusting. Thank you again for joining me here on another journey of Cynical Sermons. I hope I've pissed off a few of you. I'm sure I have. If I've pissed off Yahweh or Jebus or the Holy Spirit or anyone else from the church, they are welcome to chime in at any time. God, you got anything you want to chime in with here? A few notes? Any key points I missed? There you have it. Yahweh endorses this video. Thank you for being here. Thank you deeply to the members of this channel. I love you sincerely. I hope to see you all on future videos, but until I do, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.